Right, good evening to those of you who are joining us. Um, so, welcome to the second edition of Smash Live. I'm just going to wait a minute or so just for the numbers to build up before we get into any details and before I welcome my guests. Let's see, I'll go when we get to 15. I'll go. How about that? So, minute past 6. So I hope you're all well. And although summer's not officially over yet, is it? But it feels like it. So I hope you're dealing with the change in season okay. Um, and and you're eating well.
I mean, I
We're
don't know
nearly
about
there.
you, Andy, but I tend to eat the worst in August because it's like what there's all kinds of things, holidays to do and people to go out and see and on and on. So I feel like I eat worse at August than August than I do at Christmas.
Yeah, I think I eat quite badly all year round, actually. But okay, well, let's go. Um, we've got 13 people. Hopefully that will increase. But so, okay, so officially welcome to Smash Live 2 with Marshall Manson from Professional Lunch, which is an excellent restaurant based Substack, which I hope you're already subscribing to. And if you're not, please make sure you do. So it's twice weekly. Every Thursday, there's a restaurant review, and every Monday, there's a compilation of restaurants reviews, similar to what Smash does in a way, but very different. I'm sure we'll get into that later. Um, but by day, actually, Marshall is the CEO of Global Comms Agency, so he's got a proper job. And Professional Lunch is I guess, well, I'm going to be wrong to call it a hobby because you do it very professionally. But
Thank
so
you.
welcome to Marshall, and can you tell us how Professional Lunch, the newsletter, came about and why you decided to launch it?
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Andy. First of all, thanks very much for having me, and it's thrilled to have a chance to sit and talk with you. We're not going to get through this without me getting to ask you some questions because
Okay.
I'm a tremendous fan of your writing and the work you're doing as well. So excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me. And thanks everybody for joining us. I mean, like Professional Lunch came from a real insight, which is that I love my job, but writing about PR is boring. And I really wanted to have something I could write about on a regular basis that I enjoyed. And then two things coincidentally happened at kind of the same time. The first was that I left an old job, and my former colleagues asked me to write up a list of the restaurants that I liked in the area of that office for lunch. So I did, and then I said, "Well, I might as well do a few others around London." So I created this thing and published it on LinkedIn, and it was massive. It's to this day, it's one of the top three or four things I've ever published. Got shared around. People asked me for the PDF and so forth. And about a month went by, and inevitably I wanted to add to the thing, but I'd shared this PDF which was uneditable, and I wasn't going to get the same reach as before. I said, actually, you know what? I want a place that I can that the guide can live. So I said, well, if I'm going to create a website, I might as well put it someplace that I can, write updates and stuff. So I put it on Substack, and then I said, well, if I'm going to do that, I need to kind of have something to update. Well, okay, when I have a new restaurant to add to the guide, I'll write a review. And then I was thinking about it, and I've written Jonathan and Adam and thanked them for this. So this was ripped off with pride and appreciation. But I remembered that the E Your London guys used to do the wrap up every Monday of all the newspaper critics, and I missed that. And I said, yeah, because I used to read it every week, and I wrote them and said, listen, do you guys mind if I rip off this idea? And they both wrote back and said, absolutely, go for it. So I said, okay, I'm going to do that. So Mondays I'm going to do the critics wrap up, and Thursdays I'm going to do a review. And then I started doing, and it was just like, oh no, there's other things I'd like to write about on the Monday. So I just kind of started talking about restaurants and working life, the reasons why I think professional lunch are important, and just other stuff that I thought was interesting. So that's become the Mondays, and then the Thursdays. have been a review, and in the year plus I've been doing it, I've only missed doing a review once, which I'm pretty pleased about. So I've done one every week except for the week that I got my new current job, which was too crazy for me to do anything at all. So that was
Yeah.
the one week I missed. But aside from that, there's been a review every week, and I'm really pleased about that. And I've done my editorial calendar for the rest of the year, and I've got reviews pretty much lined up from now until the 1st of November. So I'm really pleased about how. But I don't know how this is for you, but I find writing about something that I'm passionate about really easy, and pretty fast. I suppose blessed, I guess, that I can write reasonably quickly, but I can sit down and get through the content and write about things that I hope others will find interesting and do that reasonably swiftly.
Yeah. You said earlier that writing about PR was boring. I think there's a few PRs have joined us
Yeah,
today, so
I'm sure they are, and I think
we're
every
not
one of
saying
them
that
will
PR
agree.
itself is boring, are we? We're not saying that.
Well,
No.
I mean, look, I'll leave it to everybody's individual judgment about whether PR itself is boring, but I suspect all of my PR colleagues who have joined us today, if I said that most of what's written about our industry is pretty boring, I suspect we'll get a few hearts popping up here
Yeah.
and there.
Okay. Fair enough. And your focus is mainly London, isn't it?
Yeah,
But
I mean, so I live here, and the rationale for the site was genuinely I wanted to suggest places to people that were occasion based. So the guide was predicated on here's some great places for breakfast, here's some great places for different kinds of lunch, here's some great places for different kinds of dinner. I was going to do drinks, but just never have had time. So the idea was that I wanted the reviews that I did to be similarly occasion based. So if you were looking for, I think my favorite categories in the guide is the places to take visiting Americans, which I
yeah,
felt like I had unique qualifications for. But the other one is like where things to take a client or business colleague for a one-to-one dinner. And the definition of that one is it can't feel like a date, right?
mm,
So okay,
yeah,
where can you take somebody for a one-to-one dinner that's not going to feel like a date? Well, that's actually quite an interesting needle to thread when it comes to picking out the right restaurant. So I was trying to look at it through that prism of occasion. And because I'm based in London and because most of my friends and colleagues are based in London, that felt like a natural place to focus. But over the year and a half now, I suppose I've been doing it, there have been some places that are extended London, and then there's some places that I know, people go quite frequently that I feel like, I was mentioning to you before we started, I've got to go to Labour Party conference in Liverpool next month. And a lot of others will do that as well. Like, where should you go to eat? Well, I hope I can offer at least a couple of suggestions there. Paris. I'd like to do Bristol at some point, in Brighton. Go see our friend Dan in Bristol for sure. But
yeah.
those will come in time. Just try not to rush those. But that's the idea is, yeah, focus on London and actually focus on places that the critics don't really go as much. So try really hard to focus on the city. I mean, the reality is that there aren't that many great places in the city anymore, which is a shame. But when a new one does open, I try to go big on that. I try to go big on places like Covent Garden and the area around Green Park, but not the super high end Mayfair places. Places that people might actually want to go for a pleasant lunch. Um, Places that are realistic for somebody who's going to expense it and get it by their FD.
And so just to pick up, you mentioned our friend Dan, and that's just to explain that's Dan Reagan,
Oh yes,
who
sorry.
writes notes on a napkin. He's a Bristol-based restaurateur. So just to clarify that. So coming back to professional lunch, so why lunch? Because I think lunch is sort of an important meal for you, isn't it?
So yeah, I mean, there's two reasons. The first is that I'm old enough to remember when lunch was an occasion. And there's a couple of great books out there. One was written in the kind of late 80s, early 90s, when if you were a journalist or a PR or worked in the city, like you had a lunch every day, right? And lunch was something that we did. Now, I'm not advocating for the kind of boozy, slightly debauched city lunches that I think probably got a lot of people in trouble rightly over the years. But you can find a balance there where going to lunch is an occasion worth doing. So part of it was I wanted to put the spotlight on lunch in a way that people would value, but mostly the big argument for lunch in my mind is we're in this place now where we've been through COVID and all of our working habits changed. So, people don't go in the office as much. I here in my office today, which we've got 240 people in our team in London. I suspect if we had 100 here today, I'd be shocked. I don't have any problem with that. People work from home on Mondays, and that's fine. But my thing is, if you're going to make the effort to come into the office, and increasingly for a lot of people, that is an effort, actually you might as well make that day worthwhile. You might as well dial up the value of your day in the office by getting out of the office and going to lunch or coffee or a drink or breakfast or whatever. And I suppose the kind of final justification, not just for lunch, but really all these professional encounters, is that I have never had an encounter with a client or colleague or professional friend that wasn't improved by the presence of food and drink. You can sit in the conference room. I'm sitting in one of our conference rooms today and have a meeting, and you're having a meeting. But if you involve food and drink, the quality interaction, the quality of what you're going to get out of that conversation, ultimately, what you're going to achieve and accomplish in the meeting is going to be a lot more. And so I just think there's huge value for those of us who do work in a professional context, to prioritize those moments over food and drink, as opposed to just sitting in a boring meeting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and obviously, the sort of partial death of the professional lunch has obviously had a huge impact on the restaurant industry, and especially in
Yeah.
London as well, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's really, all this, the rise of the set lunch menu, which more and more and more restaurants have gotten into, which I think is a really interesting borrowed concept from France, which I love. And the chefs are doing such clever things to keep costs of those menus down, but that are good enough to draw in diners. I think it's a great trend, but the reality is that that's an economically motivated imperative, which is we're not getting enough punchers coming in at lunchtime. Let's see if we can do something that will entice more people in. And the other great thing about a lot of those set menus is that you really can get in and out in 45 minutes. So, if there's a good place around the corner from you that you can pop into in 5 or 6 minutes walk, and then have a good lunch, 3 courses, cup of, quick espresso, and back to the office. You really can do that in an hour and 10 minutes. And I don't think anybody's going to begrudge you that time.
Yeah,
Especially given the number of times a week that most of us go to lunch these days. Most of us are confined to Pret sandwiches in our desk, which is to me the most depressing trend of all.
yeah. I saw just quickly on that. I saw that Elliston Street, Phil Howard's Michelin star restaurant, is doing a 25 quid
Yeah.
lunch, which is astonishing because when I first started eating out in London in the early 90s, 25 quid was what I was paying for, a Michelin starred lunch in
Yeah.
the places that offered it. It's
I'm
incredible when you think about it.
one of the best lunches I've had in last year was at a Michelin star place in Charlotte Street called the Ninth, where we ate the set lunch. It was 28 or 29, I can't remember. It was either 28 or 29 pounds. And one of the main options was a monkfish head, which I've never had before, and was absolutely one of the most delicious things I've ever eaten. Of course, they've got monkfish on the dinner menu, so they're butchering the monkfish, doing the fillets for dinner, and then using the head for a lunch option, and using all the other leavings for stock. So you're using absolutely every ounce of the fish. The head is delicious. It's cheap because it was going to be thrown away anyway. And I said to the chef came out and say, look, I said, man, I just think this dish is utter genius. Um, and to be able to create something out of what is truly one of the ugliest things I've ever seen,
Yeah,
um, it tasted absolutely delicious. I just think is a great culinary triumph, as
yeah,
good as any tasting menu.
yeah, yeah. I think, Fallow do a similarish thing, don't they, with the cod's head? And I had fish collar at Jose
Yeah.
Pizarro a few years back,
I've had
actually.
fish collar a couple of times now, and like it's one of those things that if you get somebody who knows what they're doing, you
Yeah,
just like I literally can't believe this is food, but I'm really happy eating it.
yeah,
I do
yeah.
like those moments though, where you're not sure it's food, and then you eat it, and you're like, no, this is food.
You said earlier about the areas of London that you cover, but you're saying not the really expensive places in Mayfair.
Well,
And
sorry, finish your
yeah, go
question.
ahead.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, what I was going to say was that we've seen, talking of sort of high end places, we've seen three quite notable closures in
Yeah,
quick succession. You know, with Victor Garvey, Voyage,
yeah,
Adam Simmons, and
yeah,
obviously most notable Claude Bozzi at Bibendum.
yeah.
Um, and I just wondered if you felt that that was any way um, a trend, that we might see more of that.
It's really interesting. I'm friends with a absolutely brilliant bachelor sommelier called Claire Thivino, and I took her to lunch a few weeks ago. She runs a business providing wine to probably 80 of the top 100 restaurants in the UK. I mean, her penetration rate with the top places is incredible. And without naming any, she said, however bad you think it is, it's worse. And you're going to see some crazy closures in the next 12 months. And I mean, Claire's right about everything, but she was absolutely right about that. I mean, I was stunned by Babendum. I was stunned by Victor Garvey. I hadn't made it to Voyage, so I hadn't had an opportunity to be stunned by that one. But if Claire's prediction is right, I think we will see more on the way. And it's interesting. I think the ones that are most at risk are these places that are Top Chef's second restaurant, where it's a hotel deal.
Yeah,
The other one that we saw recently was the one of the restaurants in the new old War Office Hotel, who'd done one of these global deals with a three, has 14 stars all around the world. He's gone, and they've pulled out of their licensing deal with him, and the thing's kind of fallen over. I think those are the ones which are most at risk because you don't have the true culinary genius in there calling the shots. They're kind of turning out catered hotel food in effect. And so you get a long way from that really truly premium special experience. I'm not saying that's the case with Vivendum, by the way. That obviously was
no,
was an exception, but it's like there's only so many places that any chef can be. There's only so many places that any great chef can look after effectively, and there's only so many places that a great chef can spread their team to. And I don't know what the limit is, but I wonder if some of the places that are over that limit are kind of most at risk. These big hotel places and so forth. We'll see. My other thing, just in terms of things I try to cover, and this has become a real focus for me. I am I've expressed frustration in my newsletter about this before. I'm frustrated by the fact that the national critics have basically opted out of covering the highest top end places. Now,
yeah,
David Ellis gave an interview where he said, he has a hard time justifying the expense to his own editors. And maybe that says more about the economic state of the Standard than it does about Ellis's preferences. And I'm sure that's true.
yeah,
But one of the things that I'm actually consciously trying to do is I do like a Michelin star dinner or lunch. I do like a 2 or 3 star experience. And so I am trying to and I have the luxury of time and resources to cover meals in those places sometimes. So I do try to cover those, and I do try to spotlight the best ones. And I have to say, I'm now absolutely contradicting my point about Mayfair because the best meal I've had in the last year was at Row on Five. Sorry, was it Row on Five in Savile
yeah,
Row?
yeah,
Um, the new place there, which was absolutely one of the most breathtaking experiences I've ever had. And I really do wish actually that the critics had space and time, I suppose, resources to put more energy into those because I appreciate my audience isn't like theirs. But the Rowan Five review that I wrote was the best read thing I've ever published in terms of reviews. People are
yeah,
interested in those kinds of places. And then the others that are top of the list have been Brooklyn's and Josephine, Bouchon, a couple of the others that are at that really high standard. I hope that continues, by the way. I'm glad my audience likes those things, and I hope they'll continue to.
yeah. I mean, with David Ellis, I mean, it has been notable over the last few weeks. I mean, we've seen, I think his latest place was a smash burger, and then before that, it was a pizza
Yeah.
slice joint. And I think, it's understandable because Evening Standard is aimed at a London audience. A lot of that audience will be younger people who want to go to those more, I suppose, TikToky places.
Yeah.
So it's understandable, but I think it'd be nice if there was a broader range that he could cover. And I just hope it isn't that expense issue that is preventing him from going to the more expensive places. But I just don't think we're going to see any of the critics do Row on
I
Five. I
Oh
think
well,
you've had that, you know.
I'm sure that's right, which is a shame, but I'm sure that's
Yeah,
true. It is just too expensive.
yeah,
Although, I mean, look, Rowan 5 got 1 star, and I'm told it's because they get stuck at 1 star because Michelin couldn't get enough inspectors in there to get them to 2 stars before the deadline. They're definitely going to go to 2, and I think they're the UK's next 3 star, honestly. And I wouldn't be surprised if they made it to 3 in the next round once Michelin's had a chance to send more folks. But your point about the critics is right, and I have to say actually, um, David's fiance Hannah Twig was doing this really trying this really new interesting new feature in the Independent, which she called something like Dining Duo or something like that, where she was doing a kind of picking a theme and then
yeah,
doing a fairly low price and a fairly high price place and basically reviewing them both and contrasting them. The last
yeah,
one ran now 6 or 7 weeks ago, and I don't know if they tried it twice and it didn't drive the readership they wanted and they walked away.
yeah,
Um, but in any event, she did a couple and I really enjoyed them. And I thought it was an interesting way for a paper like The Independent to tackle this problem. But I also appreciate it means dispensing 2 meals for one article, which is maybe
yeah.
tough to swallow.
I mean that's not necessarily the case. Um, I mean, I can't sort of, I shouldn't really say anything on this, but I, I think they found a way around that issue. Let's put it that way.
Oh, right, good, okay, fingers
So,
crossed. Good, fingers crossed.
yeah, but yeah. But I think it was interesting. There was a talking about the fine dining looking as though it's in a little bit of trouble
Yep,
compared to there's a recent story that the UK's top 100 restaurant groups have seen their profits soar by 18% to 365 million in the past year. And there you're
yeah,
talking about, um, you know, restaurant groups like places like Flatiron that are looking to expand using, capital investment and that sort of thing. And
yep.
it's sort of the, maybe mid to low range restaurants that, are seeing success more than, the higher end restaurants
It's
at the
re-
moment.
I think it's really interesting. We went through this period post COVID where that casual fast dining audience, a set of restaurants, the Cafe Rouges of the world, were really coming under a lot of pressure. Um, and it's interesting that the profit numbers seem to suggest that um, going actually down half a step to truly kind of fast casual is seems to be turning out really solid profits. And we're also seeing really interesting concepts take off. I don't have any knowledge or information about this at all, but everyone assumed that Bossy's strategy with Josephine was to open 2 and see if he could then open 10.
Yeah,
Um, and Ellis and Giles Corn both tackled that in their review, and it was interesting that Tom Parkballs didn't. But they both sort of honed in on that. And my comment on that was, I hope they don't do that actually, because I think the 2 locations they have are special. I think the minute they're 10 or 15, they get less so, but there's no question they're profitable. And if you put something at the quality of Josephine Bouchon or Josephine Bistro, outside of London, you know, virtually anywhere, it's going to be a top restaurant in that community, and I'm sure would do really, really well.
yeah,
So the economics of it are really strong, I think. And actually, the other thing that's fun about those is because, particularly in the case of Lyonnaise cooking, like actually you're often dealing with fairly cheap ingredients, so they're just cooked really well.
yeah,
So I'm interested in the economics of those, but I think you're right. The places that seem to be making money feel like it's places that are building into scale and getting real operational efficiencies out of the restaurants and making money that way. Whereas the sort of aspiring to top end places feel like they're having a harder time. Whereas the top places seem to be doing pretty well.
yeah.
It's that kind of haven't quite made it yet level that feels like is most struggling.
Yeah. Just to go back to Row on Five, Liam Collins has joined us. Hello, Liam.
Hey,
And
Liam.
he's commented that Row has 2 stars in Dubai, and the
Yeah.
conventional wisdom is that it's on to 3 stars here too. So,
Yeah, I'd
um,
be very surprised if it didn't
yeah,
make it actually. And include I haven't eaten at the one in Dubai, but Liam has been singing its praises to me since I visited it a few weeks ago or a couple of months ago now, and I have no trouble believing it. And then listen, um, I'm gonna, Spencer Metzger is the chef at Rowan Five, and I just think he's a genius. I talked to him for a while when we visited, and I just utterly blown away by him, his team, Roxanne Dup. I don't know how to pronounce her surname actually. I think it's Dupuy. Um, I mean, honestly, the best wine list in London, you know, in
Yeah.
my view. And I say that with great respect to my dear friend Issa Ball, who until I went to Rowan Five had the best wine list in London. But Roxanne's is just unbelievable.
Can I just mention to everyone watching, if you want to ask Marshall some questions or even me, then please do put them in the chat, and we'll get to those as soon as we can. So what about? So we both write about restaurant critics in our different ways. Who is your favourite restaurant critic and
Oh,
why?
at the risk of getting myself in trouble with all of them, I mean, Jimmy Famaroa's writing just speaks to me in a way that
Yeah,
really, really works for me. And I'm so happy to see him writing now more regularly for the Observer. And I hope that becomes a consistent gig for him. And indeed, I think it benefits the Observer as well, but that's a slightly different kind of conversation. I just adore his writing. And I also think he brings a different perspective everywhere he goes. And I need to single out Grace Dent for that as well. I just think, if you read 5 reviews of the same place and then read Grace's, Grace would find some other really interesting, angle or take, um, or insight based on her experience that isn't like the others. And I really admire her for that. Um, I'm not. That isn't a criticism of any of the others. So many I've now had correspondence with, and I admire what they do, and experience a mini microcosm of doing it, trying to do it well. And I'm not sure I could do it. Trying to get out regularly and eat a bunch of places, and be choiceful about what you want to review and why, and what you think your readers are into and why, and then write it well, and not be samey week after week after week. Find new ways to tell those stories in ways that your readers will enjoy. I think it's a really interesting kind of writing, and I think it's really easy if you are a writer to look at restaurant criticism and say, yeah, this is just the same thing week after week. But if it were that, I don't think you could be successful. Um, and so on some level, I think they're all successful, and they've all, proven that they have that gift, which I think is great. But if you made me choose one, it would be Jimmy. And Grace gets a kind of strong honorable mention for being just really interesting perspectives on anything and everything that she tackles.
yeah. I mean, from my point of view, I think the writer that I enjoy the most is actually David Ellis. Even
Interesting.
though I'd like his perhaps to tackle different restaurants, but I think he's the best stylist. I think
Interesting.
his writing is great. I think he's actually genuinely funny. I think he really knows his subject,
Yeah.
and I think he's got strong opinions. And I trust his judgment because of that.
Well, that's
So I
interesting.
think,
I agree
yeah,
with you about trust in his judgment. I do. And actually, I have just seen Andy Haler's here in the chat. So
yeah,
I need to acknowledge 2 other things quickly. Um, I have been reading Andy's reviews. I'm to see Andy in a couple weeks. And I really look forward to meeting him. I've been reading Andy's reviews for longer than anybody's,
mm,
because he was reviewing things that a lot of the papers weren't, for a lot of the reasons we were talking about. I love the format of Andy's reviews, and it's a similar thing with Hot Dinners. Actually, Hot Dinners invented this test drive format
mm,
that you go through and read, and it's like, this is everything I could ever want to know about this restaurant, including a pretty credible opinion about whether it's worth. I think sometimes with Gavin and Catherine, you got to kind of cut through their code a little to work
yeah,
out. But that's okay. I think if you read them regularly, the code's pretty straightforward. But I love the consistent formats of those things. And as someone who reads a lot of restaurant reviews, being able to return to those things as comfortable blankets to go, I'm going to get all of the information I need here. And one of the questions I'm going to ask Andy when I see him in a couple of weeks is how he does his wine list analysis, because I'm always blown away by
yeah,
how good it is, and all the price points and the
Yeah.
calculations of versus retail and so forth.
I,
Look, it's one of the reasons I just enjoy doing this so much is I actually enjoy reading all this stuff, and each for slightly different reasons.
I'd like to know how Andy does that because I mean, partially inspired by his reviews because I've been reading them for donkey's years as well. But I now do a sort of manual analysis. If I'm going to an expensive restaurant, I'll
Yep.
look at the wine list ahead of time and
Yep.
look up a sample of wines and compare the retail price to the list price.
Yep.
But it is so time consuming.
Oh my God.
I don't know how he does it. So he used to have an app. I don't know, Andy, have you still got your app or not? Maybe he'll make a comment and we'll find
Let
out.
us know in the comments,
And
Andy. We're now
yeah,
talking about you. We're thrilled you're here.
yeah.
Um,
But I think
I, you know,
I mean, just to say about Andy's reviews, and I think he'd admit to this. You know, he's not a pro stylist. His reviews are more detailed inspection reports
yeah,
almost. But
yeah.
I really like that style because it's so useful. You know, it's yeah. So
Sorry, I'm
Andy says I
laughing, but
do the
I
see
want to read out Andy's comments, everybody. Andy says, I do the wine list analysis slowly.
okay.
I
Well,
hope over a glass of wine.
yeah. So it's actually the app's in the past. He says, oh well. Yeah, no. So it's nice to know there's no shortcut, so I'm not missing out on anything. But so what about say? Do you have a? It's probably difficult to say this, isn't it? But a favourite professional lunch restaurant.
Ooh, that's such a good question. Um, a favorite for professional lunch. I mean, truly it was Margot until Margot closed
Oh, okay. Yeah,
recently. I loved Margot, and the Margot was such a great place to go for professional lunch because the food was amazing, but you didn't leave feeling like you'd eaten 14 tons. The service was unbelievably intelligent, but it just emotionally intelligent about what was happening at a table. Some of the best service I have ever had in London. The guy who ran the wine program there, whose name I'm sorry I blanked or I've forgotten, but he was so on top of his wine list. He had some of my favorite wines on it. And I mourn Margot almost more than some of the other things we've lost. Favorite now, ooh, actually, my office is over in South Bank, Southwark, so Borough Market's only a minute away. I think I'm now ready to say that in this area, Camille is my favorite, which I wouldn't have said even
okay.
6 weeks ago. But Camille has turned its wine list around. It's some of the best food in London going right now, and it's people enjoy it so much when you take them. It's become a really fun experience to introduce people to. So I think I'll cave and say Camille is my new favorite post Margot. And my favorite London restaurant at the moment, which I'm always happy to big up, is Trivet, which I know is a controversial choice for some people, but it's a two Michelin star place that doesn't do a tasting menu. It's run by Johnny Lake, who's ex head chef at Fat Duck, and Issa Ball, who's ex head sommelier at Fat Duck. And they don't want to ever see another tasting menu as long as they live, I think. Issa's wine list is one of the best in town. He's a genius. Johnny's a genius, and the food that comes out of the kitchen is just mind blowing. But it feels like it's the best food you'll ever eat on a plate, and it feels like it could be on the corner around the corner from your house. It's got
Yeah.
that neighborhood vibe. The people who work there are lovely, and I just think it's one of the best things going in London, and I absolutely love it.
Okay. Good. What about let's talk about dining bugbears. What rubs you up the wrong way during a professional lunch?
Um, Places that sort of so I've gotten pretty good at working these places out ahead of time, but sometimes you get them wrong. If you're with someone you don't know that well, sometimes sharing can be really difficult. And there's a
Yeah.
place around the corner from us that I won't name because I love them and I don't want to sound like I'm being gratuitously critical. But I took a group of French colleagues in there and we ordered a bunch of stuff, kind of thinking, not really wanting to share. But the pacing was so off. We didn't know each other. We weren't sharing. But like I got a starter and then 20 minutes later, two of them got mains, and then 15 minutes later, four of them got their starters, and the whole meal was just an awkward mess. So that level of like, I appreciate the kitchen sending out stuff when it's ready, and that's the model, and then I need to live with that. But on the other hand, like if you're the front of house person, it'd be amazing if you could recognize that this table is all just a little awkward. Let's see if we can get this stuff clustered in a way so that it's not we're not making it more awkward. That may be a level of emotional intelligence and empathy that I can't reasonably expect from every person who's waiting a table everywhere. But in a good place, that's kind of what I would hope for, and that's definitely a bugbear. Um, uh, the other sort of bugbear, and I wrote about this in the piece a few months ago, but I am conscious that particularly now, and there are good reasons for this, and I'm not complaining about it. But sometimes when I open my mouth, when I arrive at a maitre d' stand and say, "Hi, I'm Marshall Manson, I've got a booking," they hear my voice, hear that I'm American, assume that I'm a tourist, and I'm definitely getting the table in the back. And
Yeah,
again, there's a restaurant in Mayfair that I won't name because I love them and I don't want to be disrespectful. But I was taking clients there regularly, so I had to be in the reservation book. Um, and the maitre d' was all right, but he, whatever. Eventually, I had to say something to him. I was like, "Sir, listen, this is my sixth time here in the last 10 weeks. I'm bringing clients in here. I love your restaurant. You've got to stop seeing me by the kitchen." And eventually I had to stop going. It was like I can't take clients in here and be seated by the toilet every single time I come. And look, it may be, I said this to somebody when I wrote that piece initially. Like, it may be that I'm the asshole, and that's fine. Like I'm open minded to that possibility. Um, but I don't think I was, and whatever. If I am, fine. I'll stop. I'll eventually stop going anyway. So message received. Maybe after too many attempts. But those are my two big ones. It's like, give me a half decent table. I'm going to spend some money. I'm going to order some wine, and try to organize the food coming out in such a way that it's not making our conversation super awkward.
yeah. I mean, that thing of the plates will arrive when they're ready is I hope that's sort of going out of fashion. I mean, we were talking about Morcella before we went live, and I think that's an absolutely brilliant restaurant. And I think they may say that the dishes come out when they're ready, but when we went, they basically said, okay, well, we'll send this out first as snacks, then you can have that as your starter, then that dish, we'll
Yes.
send those all out together as sort of and it all made perfect
Yeah, it
sense.
makes sense. I agree with you, and I think this is working. So this thing of essentially creating the snacks course, doing
Yeah,
kind of snacks starters. Sorry, I'm going to decline a call quickly here. Sorry for my
okay.
finger. Um, the thing about doing snacks, then starters, then mains, and clustering each, that works for me. That's cool. Because when the first snack comes, you're going to get the other two snacks reasonably quickly thereafter. It's like, okay, we can tuck into this. And then the starters will come more or less as a group, and that's cool. And the mains will come. That's fine. It's when we were getting like snacks and then a main and then a soup and then a starter, and was like, I don't know what to do with this, and neither do my guests. That was the thing that made it awkward. And I do think we're getting away from that. And I think look, I don't actually look. I've never worked in a professional kitchen. I cook, but I've never worked in a professional kitchen, and so I don't presume to understand how the lines are working. But I assume that there's a couple of folks on snacks and a couple of folks on starters and probably a couple of folks on mains or somebody on the grill and somebody on the fish for whatever. So actually, the way the brigade is structured then lets you deliver in that way, and that's great. I think for me that's a wonderful revolutionary advance versus where we were 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah, it's when you've got a brigade serving an a la carte free course and there's five choices at each course or whatever, the real complexity comes into um
Yeah.
timing everyone so that all the dishes go out at the right time for that table together, and it takes a lot of
Hard.
skill, and
Yeah.
especially for the person running the service. So with the dishes coming out when they're ready, it just takes that level of complexity out of things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's no fun for the diner, I don't think.
I tell you
Um,
okay, I'll tell you my other bugbear because this happened recently. So we're at a place that's doing the sharing everything, right? Which is fine, but the tables are too small. So they're serving the starters on plates that are not dinner plate size, but they're not like they're big.
no.
and they bring us three, and there's nowhere to put the third one, right? And it's fine, it's cool. I mean, I'm just having a moan now, but like, okay, either you got to make the tables big enough that two people can have what you told us to order. So if you tell me to order three starters, and I do, and there's not enough room on the table, then that's a mismatch that I kind of don't know what to do with. So I'm eager for either bigger tables that will accommodate the sharing plates, or smaller plates that will accommodate
Yeah,
the table.
yeah. So yeah. Um, so just to so Liam's commented that Giles Florian
Yeah,
commented about the table roulette issue a few weeks back. I remember that review, but only vaguely. But yeah, I mean,
Giles went 3 weeks on tables on a sort of table crusade.
yeah,
It
he
was a
has
bit
his little
funny actually.
passions. I mean, I had an issue, well, not an issue, but I went to well, actually, I'll tell you where it was. It was the Park,
Right.
Jeremy King's restaurant. Went for breakfast. The place was half empty. And we didn't get a nice booth by the table. They just sort of put us by a table close to the
Hmm.
waiting station. And I just sort of thought, well, why have you
Why?
done that? You know,
Yeah,
it's
that's
just,
weird.
I didn't moan because I was trying to be a good customer and just,
Yeah.
go with the flow. But I'm not a good enough customer that I can sit there and not fume about it. So
Yeah.
perhaps I should
Yeah.
have said something. But
Yeah. I mean,
um,
I'm not smart enough to know what a good table is all the time, but I know where I'm comfortable in rooms. And there's no way for them to know that. But when we went to Josephine Bistro, they gave us what was properly the best table in the restaurant because it had
mm,
the best view. It was the place to you were being seen, and I definitely am not good looking enough to be in the table where everybody's looking at me. But it was like I could see the whole restaurant, I could see everything that was going on, and I absolutely loved where they sat us. I was like, I don't know what
yeah.
we did to deserve this, but like, cool, thank you. It was absolutely fantastic.
Well, so talking of Josephine, Lynn Morgan, hi Lynn, has commented, what use cases do we have of restaurants like Josephine working outside London, as Marshall mentioned, as it seems
Uh,
tough to me.
well,
Uh, I,
I'll give you one example. I was in Birkdale, which outside of Southport in Merseyside, I suppose Liverpool last week, and
yeah,
there's a little family-owned joint, the second generation. The chef who took over about a year ago trained at La Trompette. It's called Verite. It is absolutely on the Josephine Bistro model. The Verite is much older. They're serving fantastic kind of French-inspired food, mostly proper French, but some derivatives. Now, admittedly, Birkdale is a well-off suburb, and so has knows its market. But like, I had a dinner in there that I would go back there in a minute. And if Verite was in London, they're doing this guy's doing food that is, on par with what you get in Trumpet. And admittedly, it's Birkdale, so it's half the price. And a great wine list. Guys who really knew what they were doing on the one list, and I enjoyed it immensely. Admittedly, that may be the one exception to the rule, but there's at least one.
yeah. I mean, I'd say, although it's not a similar cuisine, I think if Josephine did expand outside London, they'd probably be following the example of places like Hawksmoor and Dishoom. I mean,
Yeah.
those are the two groups, London-based groups, that have expanded, and they've tended to concentrate on the major cities, really. So, and I think there might be a Dishoom in someone in maybe in Cambridge. I don't know, but they tend. So that's how I would see Josephine expanding. Would be to, Manchester and Sheffield and Edinburgh and Glasgow and all that. And
I mean,
I wouldn't. I don't think they'd go down the Cafe Rouge route. I don't
no.
think you'd see 50 or 100 of them. I think you'd see 15 or 20 maybe.
Premium. Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with that. I agree with that.
yeah,
And listen, I love Edinburgh, but if you dropped a Josephine Bouchon or Bistro at the same level of quality as the ones here in Edinburgh, it'd be among Edinburgh's five best restaurants.
yeah,
And I say that without reservation. It's just a great place. And my thing about Josephine is I really question whether the bossy team can train people at a sufficient quality to actually export the high quality of the experience that you have in those two restaurants. I mean, Josephine Bouchon is truly among the closest to perfect restaurant experience that I've had in the last year. Up there with Rowan Five and Moore Hall. I just utterly blown away by it.
mm. Yeah, no, no, I don't think that would be possible. So I think you'd have to accept there'd be at least a
Some,
slight lowering of standards in order to affect that rollout. I just it's not possible to do that. I don't think.
yeah, I agree with you. I agree with
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
yeah. So what else? What about so bringing it back to our favorite newsletter platform, Substack? Who else? Apart from this mutual appreciation society we've got running here, who
Yeah,
else do
indeed.
you read and enjoy
Well, we
on
talked about
Substack?
Dan Regan from Bristol.
Yep,
He's been a huge discovery, he's really only been writing for a few weeks, but I absolutely adore what he's been doing, and it's such a helpful, useful, interesting perspective to see.
yeah,
Some of my other favorites, Sam Wilson, who I think who writes one called Bald Flavors, is just a fantastic up and coming, really good, incisive writer. Um, and then Dominic, what the hell's Dominic's surname? Dominic, who writes Braze, who I
yeah,
haven't met, but I think may also perhaps hail from the U.S. or has spent substantial time there. Um, I love his stuff, and he does interesting. Like he did one yesterday where he's been through all the places in London that are doing pizza by the slice. And so he's done a by the slice analysis, which is something I wish I had ever had time to do, but it was brilliant. And I think he probably lives in North London, which is the opposite to me. So, I live in Southeast London and I'm heavy on London Bridge and the city and the West End. And he's sort of heavy on North London and some other East London and Shoreditch and Hackney and stuff. So actually, between the two of us, if you read both of us, you get an awful lot of London, actually. Neither one of
yeah.
us particularly goes far west, but he's great. And I enjoyed his writing as well. So those are probably some of my favorites. I'm sure I'm forgetting people who I'd love to acknowledge. Actually, I need to also. There's people like Chris Popple's been writing on Blogspot for years,
Yeah,
and has recently come on to Substack. And I want to write Chris to ask him how that's going, and I hope it's going well. But Chris is one of these people who gets around. He's a good, solid writer. He writes in tremendous detail about places, and I just admire his longevity. I don't know if in 10 years we're going to still be talking about professional lunch. Maybe we will. But Chris has been around for a long time, and I can't do anything but admire him for sticking with it for so long.
well, I'm going to mention not only because they're on this live event, but there's an amazing interview with Faye Mashler in a
Oh my!
recent
I read that
edition
in
of
the
Beatles.
magazine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
yeah. Okay. So that's
I think
now
I may have
online.
seen the Vittles guys show, but the that piece, the interview with Faye, the Vittles guys sent out the physical copies of the magazine. I took it on holiday with me, and I
Yeah.
read the whole thing cover to cover. And the interview with Faye was just, I mean, for me who didn't grow up in London and wasn't here for that period, but
Yeah.
has heard things about it from various others. And I've read, some of A. Gill's books and other things, but like that perspective on what London was like in that period was just so good. So for all of our listeners who aren't the Vittles team and Faye, if you haven't read this, I might even try to put it in the chat for this if I can. It is
Yeah.
absolutely a must read.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant piece of writing as well, I thought.
The other two I'd like to mention is so one is called Vanilla Black.
Yep.
And he's so it's Andrew Dark that used to run a restaurant called Vanilla Black in London. It's a vegetarian restaurant, but years ahead of its time. And he's writing basically a memoir of his time running that restaurant, and it's really fun. And he's very funny, and it's really if you want to know what goes on behind the kitchen door, that is the Substack to read.
Yep.
Um, and the other one that I absolutely love is Douglas Blyde, who is a drinks expert. I guess he writes for the drinks business, and he writes for the Evening Standard. But he's got a Substack where he publishes, I suppose, is more experimental narrative and fiction and sort of semi-fiction. And some of it is adjacent to the restaurant industry, some of it isn't. But
So is
if you like, I put slightly esoteric writing. I'd highly recommend Douglas Blythe.
Well, I love so my wife was mostly a vegetarian when Vanilla Black was at its peak here in London. And we had a couple of really special occasion dinners in there. And I've told Douglas on Substack how much we enjoyed his restaurant. I agree with you. I love his writing. And there's a couple of wine writers as well. So I'm in my wine. Andy Nether
Yeah,
is just brilliant. And I always, it's always interesting. I always am excited about the readers. I feel like I'm learning something from. You're one of those actually. Every time I read something you publish, I feel like I'm learning something. And Andy Nether's one of the others. It's like every time I read Andy, it's like, oh, I didn't know that, and that's really
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. I mean, he's my sort of apart. Well, no, he is my sort of go-to guy for wine. And I think he's possibly maybe the best writer out there at the moment. I mean, I think got to acknowledge Jancis Robinson in the Financial
Yeah.
Times. But
Uh,
apart from that, who else is doing? I mean, there's Henry Jeffreys on
well,
Substack
the,
as well.
so I'm afflicted by being a wine collector, and so I read a lot of wine content. The other one, and she's not on Substack. She runs her own paid for newsletter. But if you're into Bordeaux, she is absolutely the definitive source of news about Bordeaux, and that's Jane Anson.
Okay,
And I've met her a couple of times, and she's one of these people that I'm just in awe of. She drinks hundreds of wines, thousands of wines to taste a vintage. And I'm not sure there's any better palate when it comes to Bordeaux or wine in general than Jane. She's got a great newsletter that's well worth subscribing to if you're into your wines.
okay, great. Well, I think that's enough plugging fellow
Plugging other people.
Substackers. Read
So
our
actually,
read our letters. That's what we want.
Andy, if you'll forgive
Subscribe.
me, I've got a question for you. I mean,
Okay.
you and I do the critics things in slightly different ways. So,
Mm.
my mission that I've set myself is what I want to do is provide a shortcut for my readers to see, okay, here's what all the critics did this week, and go off and read the two or three that they care most about. You write proper piece of what I would call literary criticism. You're reading their criticism, as it were, and give it, essentially providing some perspective, and often inside perspective that I'm not in a position to provide because I don't have the knowledge. What excites you about that, and why do you pick up the pen on that every week and read all those things and provide that level of criticism? What's behind your motivation there?
So what I wanted to do was so I was finding it difficult to get commissions basically, but I really want to write all the time. So I thought, well, if people aren't going to commission me to do this, I'm just going to publish it myself. And Substack is a really good platform to do that, I think. It's got its issues, obviously, but I think it's a really good platform. And I thought, well, if this is going to be weekly, I'm going to need some sort of weekly stimulus to feed the newsletter.
Yep.
And I've always read restaurant reviews. Well, for the last 30 years, I used to buy before the internet, I would buy every newspaper that had restaurant reviews in them and read them. Yeah. And I've got it's slightly mental, but I've got a huge collection of clippings in my office
Amazing.
from the pre-internet days.
Amazing.
So I've always been obsessed with restaurant reviews, and I've been lucky enough to write them for the press on occasion. But I just thought it'd just be a really good basis to use as a springboard to talk about what's happening in the UK restaurant scene at the
Yep.
moment. And hopefully, it doesn't always work out this way, but hopefully, what the national critics are writing about should be a sort of barometer for what's going on in the UK scene.
Yep.
But then also I do because I think the job's important, and I don't think enough critics treat it as importantly as they should do. I also thought, well, look, I'm 60 now. Fuck it, I'm just going to say what I think about people,
I love it. It's
and so
fantastic.
I just let them have it. and I don't really care about the consequences. And I think that was very, very freeing for me. But I think, so I don't, I try not to be just mean for the sake of it, but I, will always go for the joke, but also I want to say something informative and useful and entertaining. So I think that's always in the back of my mind to do that.
Well, I think you do it brilliantly. I really do. I mean, so here's actually building on part of that answer. It's interesting to me that if you go back, to the times that Faye, who's with us, and Adrian Gill and others were kind of, I'm going to say, pioneering the approach. They were writing. I think most of them were just writing one thing a week. I'm not positive about that. You'll know, but I think generally speaking, you were a critic. You write a review, or perhaps two a week, and that was what you did. Now I think it's really interesting that Charlotte and Sitwell in particular are
Yeah.
writing and Corin obviously are writing columns in addition to their weekly reviews. And I can't decide what I make of that. I can't decide if it just doesn't matter. In other words, they're eating out. They're gonna eat out 3 or 4 times a week and then pick something and write a review of it. So it doesn't matter if they're writing other things or if it's distracting from the criticism element of the job. And I appreciate that these days the papers simply can't afford to pay a restaurant critic decent money to only write one column a week. They need
Yeah.
traffic. I also have a suspicion that the writing more columns actually adds up to more eyeballs because, it's that consistent publishing and therefore people follow them. But what do you make of this? Because I think it's really interesting. The number of Ellis is the same. Ellis writes loads of stuff now.
Yeah.
I can't think. Rayner's really the only. I think Rayner's the only critic now who just does the restaurant column and nothing else. I need to think about that. I'm sure that's wrong. But anyway, what do you think of this thing with the critics for having to write more than one thing?
Well, I think it's definitely an issue of funding. But what I would say before we go on is A.A. Gill used to also write the TV column for the
Ah,
Times.
I've forgotten that. Of
Yeah.
course he did. Yes,
So
of course he
so
did.
there is a precedent, and maybe if you looked back, you might find other
And others.
examples.
Yeah, yeah.
But often it was, say for example, when Tracy McLeod was reviewing for the Independent back in the 90s. I'm pretty sure that's all she did, and it was probably on a freelance basis, I would guess. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think it's a problem as long as you have a passion and knowledge about your subjects of restaurants. I think the issue is when you take, and I'm going to use this example, when you take someone like Charlotte Ivers, whose background is in writing about politics and also about her experience as a young woman in London, and then give her a very, very high profile restaurant column, I think that's an issue because she does not know her subject well enough. And, I do not respect her opinion about what she writes about because of that fact. So I
Mhm.
think that's the issue. I don't think it's an issue if people are writing more than a restaurant column. It's if they don't have the credentials to be a restaurant critic.
Interesting.
That,
Yeah, that's
that's
interesting.
my issue.
Yeah. Well, it'd be interesting. I'm really intrigued to see how this whole field. I mean, what we're talking about, 7 or 8 posts max, in the country. So, and the whole sort of field was quite fixed in stone for years, and
Yeah,
then Rayner's moving, has kicked off a bit of change. Although that's happened more slowly than I expected. But anyway, it'd be interesting to see if other new voices emerge. It feels like even Rayner. I love his writing, and I hope he's doing well from the FT. But I wonder how long he's going to want to continue doing that, and I wonder how long Sitwell. It's the same. It feels like we're kind of on the cusp of some more generational change here, and I'm interested to see what we get in the next generation of voices. I hope it's not what the Observer's doing, where it's just like here's somebody random that you can never get to know and doesn't necessarily know anything about restaurants.
I
That
think.
model doesn't work for me for exactly the reason you just said. There's no reason to trust anybody's opinion.
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure they're going to settle on someone eventually, but they're just taking their time about it, aren't they?
Yeah.
I just noticed we're in the last minute of the broadcast, so I'm going to wrap things up and say thank you so much for joining us Marshall. It's been really great fun. We've never met in real life, so it's the first time
No.
we've met at all. So it's been a pleasure to sort of meet you, and
Yeah.
hopefully we can rectify that at some point in the
Well, we should
future.
have lunch. Let's have lunch.
Yeah,
The next
let's have
time
a
you get to London,
professional
or the
lunch.
next time I get to Brighton.
I should
And
say, I mean, you're the expert of professional lunch. I'm the expert of the unprofessional lunch. So we'll have to see
great.
how it
Well,
goes.
I look forward to that. I'll go unprofessional actually. And listen, can I just say a huge thank you again to all the folks who've joined us. I mean,
Yes.
I sort of, there are an awful lot of folks who've joined us to listen to this conversation who I genuinely admire, and
Yeah.
I'm really grateful and appreciative of that of everybody for joining. So thank you. And if you
Yeah.
haven't subscribed to Professional Lunch, please do.
Yeah. And I echo that, Marshall, those sentiments. I was quite shocked to see a few of those names come up. So, yeah, real honour. So, thank you very much indeed. And I'll say goodbye. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks everybody. Really
Cheers.
appreciate it. Nice to see you. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Thanks, Andy. Bye.